Hello, students. Welcome. Today we're going to dive into a really important topic from your economics textbook, poverty in India. You know, it's one of the biggest challenges our country has faced since we became independent. So what we'll do is we'll try to understand what poverty really is, where it comes from, and of course, what's being done to solve it. Ready? Let's get started. Now, when we talk about poverty, it's so important to remember that this isn't just a word in your textbook, right? For millions and millions of people, it's their daily life. Just look at this picture. It really shows you what that struggle is like. The daily fight for basic things we might take for granted, like food, a safe place to live, or even just a steady job. It's a really complex problem, and it's something we need to understand with a lot of thought. So that brings us to the big questions, doesn't it? Where does poverty even come from? I mean, how did it become such a big problem? And maybe most importantly, what are we actually doing to solve it? That's what we're going to explore together in this session. All right, let's start digging into the causes. The first thing to understand is that poverty didn't just appear out of nowhere. It's not an accident. It actually has very deep roots both in history and in our economy. One of the biggest historical reasons, and this is really important, goes all the way back to the time of British colonial rule. You see, their policies ended up destroying many of our traditional industries and handicrafts, which meant that millions of people lost their way of making a living. So that was the historical disadvantage. And then for many years, even after independence, things didn't get better very quickly. Our country's economic growth was, well, it was very slow. We're talking about a long time, almost 30 years, right up to the early 1980s. Because of this slow growth, the per capita income, that's just the average income for each person, it barely grew at all. Just think about it like this. If the whole economy is like a cake, and the cake isn't getting any bigger, how can you give everyone a bigger slice? It's almost impossible, right? And that slow growth had a knock-on effect. It created a whole bunch of other problems. For one, it meant not enough new jobs were being created. And at the same time, our population was growing quite fast. So you have more people, but not more jobs. On top of all that, there was a huge gap between the rich and the poor. So whatever little economic growth we did have, the benefits didn't really reach everybody. A lot of people were just left behind. Okay, so we've talked about the big causes, but it's also really important to know that poverty looks different depending on where you are. The challenges a family faces in a village can be very different from the struggles of a family living in a big city. So let's take a closer look at these two, you could call them the two faces of poverty. So here we can see a clear comparison. On one side, you have rural poverty. A big problem there is landlessness. Many families just don't own any land to farm. This means they depend on seasonal work, which isn't available all year round. And then there's the unequal distribution of land, where a few people own most of it. Now, on the other side, you have urban poverty. This is often the result of people moving from villages to cities, hoping for a better life. But what they often find are informal jobs, like street vendors or daily wage laborers, where the income is very low and not at all regular. This leads to poor living conditions, often in slums. To make this really clear, let's think about the story of Laka Singh from your textbook. Remember him? He's a landless laborer. He doesn't own any land, so he has to look for odd jobs on the farms of bigger farmers. The work isn't steady, so his income isn't steady either. This picture, it really captures that feeling of uncertainty that millions of families in our villages face every single day. Now, this lack of a steady income, it leads to another huge problem, and that is the trap of being in debt. You know, indebtedness is a very serious issue for the poor. It's a bit of a tricky thing because it can be both a cause of poverty and also a result of it. Let's see how that cycle works. So this is what we call the vicious cycle of debt. It starts with a need for money, right? A poor family might need to borrow for farming, or maybe for a wedding, or a medical emergency. Step 2, because they can't get loans from proper banks, they often have to go to local money lenders who charge very, very high interest rates. Then comes step 3. With their low income, it becomes almost impossible to pay back the loan. And that leads to the final step, they get trapped. They often have to take another loan just to pay off the first one. And this cycle can go on and on, trapping families in poverty for generations. Okay, so we've spent some time understanding the problem and its causes. It sounds quite difficult, doesn't it? But now let's shift our focus to the solutions. What is being done about it? Well, the government of India has a clear strategy to fight poverty, and it's an approach with a few different parts. This strategy basically has two main pillars, or you can call it a two-pronged approach. The first prong is all about promoting economic growth. The idea here is simple. If the whole economy grows, it creates more opportunities and more jobs for everyone. The second prong is about specific, targeted anti-poverty programs. These are schemes designed to directly help the poorest people. The important thing is that these two approaches are designed to work together to support each other. And there is a very clear link between economic growth and poverty reduction. If you look at the data, since the 1980s, India's economy has been growing much faster. This higher growth has definitely helped in reducing poverty. Why? Because a growing economy means more jobs. It also means the government has more money from taxes, which it can then spend on important things for human development, like building more schools and hospitals. So that's the overall strategy. But how does it actually work on the ground? Let's now look at some of the most important government programs that were launched to fight poverty directly. One of the most important programs, a real cornerstone of this strategy, is the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act. It's a long name, so we usually just call it MGNREGA. It was launched in 2005. Now, this is a truly landmark law. Think of it as a safety net for people in rural areas. It provides them with a legal right to employment, which gives them some security. So what exactly does MGNREGA promise? Well, here's the core guarantee. It provides 100 days of paid wage employment every year to every rural household that asks for it. And something that is very, very important is that 1/3 of the jobs under this scheme are reserved for women. This is a huge step for women's empowerment in our villages. All right, another really important scheme is the Pradhan Mantri Poshan Shakti Abhiyan, or PMPOSHAN. Many of you might know this by its older name, the Midday Meal Scheme. This scheme is very clever because it has two main goals. First, it helps improve the nutrition of school children. And second, by providing a free, cooked meal at school, it encourages children to come to school regularly and helps them concentrate on their studies. So you see, it tackles both health and education at the same time. Now, these programs are definitely making a big difference. But we have to be realistic. Getting rid of poverty completely is a long journey. It's a huge challenge. And it's a common misconception to think that just one scheme can solve everything overnight. That's just not possible. These schemes are a very important part of the solution, but they're not the only part. So for a real long-term solution to poverty, we need to look beyond just these schemes. We need to build a much stronger foundation for our society. What does that mean? Well, it means we need to keep our economy growing, yes, but we also have to focus on things like providing good quality education and healthcare to everyone. And as we've seen, empowering women and supporting the weakest sections of society is absolutely essential. These are the keys to making sure people not only get out of poverty, but stay out of it. And this quote from Mahatma Gandhi really says it all, doesn't it? He said, "India would be truly independent only when the poorest of its people become free of human suffering." This reminds us that fighting poverty isn't just an economic goal. It's about the very idea of our nation. It's about making sure that every single citizen can live a life of dignity, free from suffering. So, to sum up what we've discussed today, we've seen that poverty is a complex problem with deep roots, and tackling it requires a combination of things: continued economic growth, good government programs that actually reach the poor, and a long-term commitment to social factors like education, health, and equality. There are no easy, overnight solutions. So as we close, I want to leave you with a question to think about. After everything you've learned today, what do you believe is the single most important thing India needs to do to become completely free of poverty? Think about it.